Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. My name is Chris Province and I'm excited today to be dropping a bonus episode where we're going to talk about relationships and gifting with my good friend John Ruhlin. John, how are you doing today?
Fantastic, man. Can't wait for this.
Awesome. Thank you for the gift of your time. Man, where to even start? So, John, I know you're an author. You've got an entire business that focuses on helping leaders build relationships with either current customers, future customers, and really, I guess, put more love out into the world. And that's always something that we love to talk about. So, just a little bit of background. Can you tell us what you've been up to and what you focus on day to day?
Yeah, well, sometimes people hear the book Giftology, the name, and they're like, I don't really care about gifts. How is this a business conversation that's relevant, right? They're like, I don't care about gifts. I want to drive revenue. I want to drive referrals. I want to drive retention. And I would agree. Like, I wrote the book Giftology, but I don't really get, like, my love language isn't gifts. What I really care about is results. And I care about, what everybody cares about, that in business, it basically rises and falls on one thing, and that's relationships. It could be a relationship with your employees, it could be a relationship with your investors, your clients, your players. Almost every business rises and falls on that human connection. And so when people are like, I don't really care about gifts, I'm like, I get it. I totally understand. Like, this isn't a woo-woo, like hold hands and sing kumbaya. Like, this is really born out of necessity for me. I didn't grow up around, like nice gifts or nice things or nice areas. I grew up in Ohio. I grew up milking goats every morning. So I tell people, if a goat milking farm kid can land the Cubs as a client or the Jaguars or NBA teams, there's an art and a science and a practicality to what we're going to talk about. So I grew up doing those things, being basically poor, and didn't want to be poor anymore. So I was going to go be a doctor and make my mom proud. And my life really kind of changed because of an introduction and a connection to a mentor. It's my girlfriend's dad was a law firm owner. And when you're poor, you notice when people are generous. And Paul was the guy that was always doing crazy, generous things for people. And because of it, his business just was booming. Like, every deal came his way. Like, the real estate that he bought magically became like the Walmart development. And so I remember pitching. I went and, out of desperation to pay for med school, I went and interned with Cutco, the knife company. And, if you think it's hard to like sell, casino, like gaming or insurance or financial services, like try selling knives that are like thousands of dollars, to your girlfriend's dad. That's like the most awkward pitch and sale on the planet. But Paul didn't make me feel weird. He was like the kind of guy that was just warm and inviting and encouraging. And so he bought a set for himself and his 3 unmarried daughters. That's who he was. Like, he was just generous. And then he asked me the question that, like, super generous. He's like, John, I don't know what else I can buy, but, like, I'd love to help you hit your goals. So I come back a week later. I'm like, Paul, you're always buying things for your clients. Would you have mercy on me and maybe buy like these $200, $300 pocket knives, since all your clients are dudes? And he changed my life forever with this statement. He's like, I don't want to order pocket knives. Could I order a bunch of the kitchen knives, the paring knives? And I'm like, Paul, all your clients are running like $1 million and $1 billion, like lumber yards, home builders, insurance firms. Why would you give them a kitchen tool? That's weird. And he said, John, the reason I have more referrals and deal flow and access is I figured out a simple truth when I started the firm 35 years ago. And I figured out if you take care of the family in business, everything else seems to take care of itself. So it was like this MBA program for me, like in a moment. And I started to understand that it wasn't about the stupid knives, although to this day we do millions of dollars in these knives. Paul understood reciprocity and pouring into relationships and the psychology of humans. And so I started to mimic Paul. I'm 20, Paul's 60. I'm like, I want to be Paul someday when I'm 60 years old, right? I got 40 years to get there. And so by the time I started to mimic things, by the time I was a senior in college, Cutco's worked with about 2 million sales reps. And so we became the #1 rep in the history of the company out of 2 million sales reps by modeling what we now call Giftology. But really, it's just a process of understanding how to build influential relationships with your most valuable people.
Yeah. I mean, it's this I mean, there's some play in here, and I think, the story about Paul illustrates that, but this notion of give and it will be given to you. And this mindset of, as leaders, as true entrepreneurs that understand return on relationship, giving first with faith that those things are exactly what's returned. Otherwise, my mindset and how I approach the world and what I give to the world is what ultimately is given back to me. And, can I explain, how do you reconcile the return on relationship versus return on investment? Is the relationship the multiplier or the integrated? What's your kind of approach, or how do you read those things dancing together?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times ROI is short-term focus, right? It's like, I want to give and I want to get. But most of the time in business, relationships carry the day. And like, you can do like cool ads or Facebook ads, and maybe you get a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio. I've seen where companies have been able to invest in a relationship with no strings attached. Like, that's the key, is most people want to put like some sort of caveat or some sort of handcuffs onto it. And I liken it to, if you give, if you go to your husband or your wife and say, hey, I'm going to give you this, you got to go to the bedroom to get it. That's not a gift. That's a manipulation. That's an ROI statement of like, I want this, so I'm going to give you this, carrot and stick method.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times, like, our most valuable relationships are the ones where like it's not transactional. Like, everybody says they want the relationship, they're only doing things at transactional times. Like, I want you to come on property. Here's your thing. I want you to stick around for 25 years. So you got to wait for 25 years to get the gold watch. That's not a gift. That's an incentive. That's a manipulation. Now we're okay with it because we're basically understand the rules of, if you do this, you get this.
Right.
You get a paycheck if you put 40 hours in. But nobody's like, oh my gosh, you're paying me a paycheck, or oh my gosh, you're giving me this trinket. Like, if you want to connect with somebody's heart, like, there's a different level of understanding, and that's where the ROR comes in. And I've seen where you could put it, like, everybody wants to put $1 in and get it, $2 back. But if you invest in the relationship for the long term and for decades, not days, you could put $1 in and get $50 back. Or like law of the harvest, if you want to go Old Testament times,
Yeah.
you get 100x or 1,000x. Like, law of the harvest says, you're gonna, like, you plant the acorn in the ground, it turns into an oak tree. You can't even fathom how much comes from that. But how long did it take for the oak tree to grow and exist and watering? There's a process there. And so that sounds all woo-woo, but we've seen where, and most people, if they've been in business long enough, they have a few dozen people where they've had their back and they've done things that were so out of the ordinary, where it's like one relationship turns into a client that's worth $10 million over the lifetime. And all they invested was $1,000. Right. Like,
Yeah.
so ROR, return on relationship, destroys ROI, but you do have to have faith, and you do have to play things out in years versus saying, I got to have this happen this month. And so oftentimes there's a balance of like, hey, there's short-term realities. We got to keep the lights on. We got to pay our bills. But when you start doing the ROR thing, like, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. And that's a great call out. I think the ROI in the near term return on capital deployed, it's not necessarily vibrant. It doesn't necessarily advance sustainability. Like, focusing on relationships elevates that vibrance, it elevates sustainability, and ultimately it's because it's about community. And a community isn't built on what happens today. The community is built around what happens long term. And vibrant, sustainable communities require vibrant, sustainable people. And naming and I like what you said, like, manipulation isn't a cuss word, right? If the objective is to drive ROI on a delivery, or ROI on a delivery, we can do that. But understand, especially I want to speak to those folks in our casino environments, or our casino operations, like, what we have historically called gifting, those are promo items, because there's absolutely an expectation of, we spend X dollars, we get back Y dollars. That's why we invite who we invite. But this kind of radical, disruptive approach of going in home with a gift, with a true gift, and kind of what's that look like, and what are some of those rules?
Yeah. Well, I think that if you're dictating, like a gift by its very nature is recipient focused. Like, right, like you think outside the casino or outside the business world, if you're going to somebody's wedding, like that's one of the most common like times that you're going to give a gift, right? Would you ever go to this, your best friend's wedding, and on the beautiful Tiffany's vase, compliments of, Foxwoods? No. Would you ever put compliments of Ernst & Young? No. Compliments of the Chicago Cubs? No. I don't care how cool your brand is. You're going to make it recipient focused because it's about the human to human connection. It's a relationship. It's a friendship, right? And we all want to get to that friendship level with our clients, whether we're the host of the casino or the GM. Like, we all want like the human to human connection with people, but we do things in the casino or the business world that we would never do in the personal world. And we forget they're both human relationships. And so oftentimes a gift should say, hey, what would that other person, what would make them feel special? What do they care about? Well, you'd love for them to live at the casino, but they spend, 80% of their time, even if the best players spend 80% of their time at home, not at the casino. So they probably care about their kitchen and their family and their hosting and their hospitality and all of these different things. So why don't you meet them there and woo them there, just like you would if you're going to go to somebody's wedding? Like, you'd make it all about them, their name, their spouse, their future spouse's name, their family name, maybe their favorite Bible verse or their favorite quote or their wedding date. Everything would be recipient. And then now they have something that every time they use the Tiffany's vase or the Cutco knives or the whatever, they're triggered subconsciously to remember who gave them that artifact, that heirloom, right? We all want to be top of mind so that somebody thinks about our property or thinks about our business relationship. But so oftentimes we're sending somebody something, and even like people are like, well, John, like I don't want them to forget where it came from. And I'm like, guys, if I gave you a Rolex, like Chris, if I gave you a Rolex, but I have to put Giftology on it to remind you where it came from?
No.
The answer is no. You would look at that Rolex every single day, multiple times a day, and subconsciously you'd be reminded. And now you have this story to go talk about and think about and tell about our relationship. And so oftentimes people, they want to try to shortcut things, and they're like, oh, we got to send this toaster or this polo or this Lululemon jacket or this whatever, and we got to put our logo on. I'm like, you just turned that into a promotional item. Even the nicest thing in the world, that is not a gift. You made it about you. And because of that, now it's transactional. Nobody's going to be like getting teary-eyed because you gave them XYZ with a logo on it. You turn it into a business transactional thing versus a one-to-one human thing. And so that's those little nuances. People will try to like do Giftology, and they're like, John, I did Giftology, it didn't work. And I'm like, well, tell me the recipe you followed. And they're like, well, we sent this, we put our logo on it. But I'm like, you didn't do Giftology, you did Giftology-ish. Like, you can't expect to get the results unless you're willing to follow the recipe. And that's where like people are like, I want people to come on property. I'm like, if you want people to come on property more, you need to meet them in a new location at home. And now you'll start pulling them into, because you have an emotional connection and relationship. And that's the psychology of all this has been proven. You read any of Robert Cialdini's stuff about influence or persuasion. He's an academic. He's been studying it for 30, 40 years. He's validated all of the things that we do and talk and teach about in the academic world. We're just practitioners of what he's already proven over the last 50 years.
Yeah, it's just such a radical concept to say, John, I've for 15 years, I've been sending gifts to players, and every Wednesday they come pick them up. And every Wednesday I make $100,000 because we ask people to come get their gifts. And now you're saying, hey, Chris, as an operator, you should really think about meeting people where they are and doing something for them without an expectation of return on that day. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, it's a scary thing, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really scary. But here's the thing. When you say do this, get this, versus I'm going to love on you with no strings attached. We all know when somebody does something really nice for us, like think about your best friend, when they go out of their way to do something. It's not your birthday. It's not Christmas. You didn't send them a referral for $1 million. And so a friend of yours goes and does something for you completely out of the blue, gets you tickets to the Super Bowl, gets your kid a recommendation for Harvard or college. Like, think about somebody that's done a favor for you. That's a person that's close to you. What bubbles up inside of you?
Right.
Almost every human, we have this inclination, like, and Adam Grant's written about this in his book, Give and Take. There's givers, takers, and matchers. Most people are matchers. When you do something really nice for somebody with no strings attached, whether it's your spouse, your player, your employee, inside, we want to reciprocate and we want to give back to that person. And oftentimes, here's the fun part: the Cornell study that talked about like why you put a little mint in the check when you're at the restaurant. That mint costs a half a cent, maybe. The tips went up 16% over what they normally would have been. It was like thousands of a percent over what it should have been. Why? Because this little act of gratitude that was unexpected. It's why the Ritz has the whole concept of surprise and delight.
Right.
Most people do expected things at expected times and they get expected results. They invest $1, they get $1.25. But when you do the mint, that's totally unexpected. You get not, you invest $1, you get $1.25. You invest $1 and you get like $125.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any logical sense. So yes, there's faith involved, but there's enough data out there on when you do things very thoughtfully as a surprise and delight, the way God's wired us, whether you believe in God or not, this human nature of being tribal is you invest in somebody, no strings attached, and you keep doing that. That's the key. You keep showing up, it builds up this reciprocity reservoir that creates this tidal wave. But most people are afraid to lose their jobs. And so that's not just casinos, pro sports teams do this, insurance companies, most people, there's too much risk. There's too much uncertainty involved. And so all of your competitors keep doing the same things because nobody wants to take that first step. But the ones that do reap those massive rewards because it's so unusual to surprise and delight somebody versus do a manipulation.
Yeah. I think a lot of times as business leaders, we of course, we're always watching the top line, right? In when we can stop, there's nothing we can do by looking at that top line that changes it. But when we go out and we say, I'm doing this for you, that number changes. When it's, I'm doing this for you, our player, I'm doing this for you, our team member. That's when the number starts to change. The team members get more engaged. They focus on, the work. They deliver more inspired programming or innovative programming because they're being innovated into, because we're doing it for them. And the same thing with the player. Like, if you want them to give discretionary resource to our organization, then we have to give them discretionary resource of our organization. It's very reciprocal. And I always say this, just like a team member is never going to give the player, the guest, something they don't receive, that player is never going to give us something that we don't give them. So if we want their discernment, if we want their discretion, if we want their resource, we have to give them our resource. And the more we do it without constraint, the more that other bucket will grow. But we can't change that revenue number and grow revenue.
No, it's we see this even with our own company. Like, people are like, John, well, how do you pull this off in your own company? Like, what is Giftology like? I'm like, well, think about with employees. If you do offer health insurance and 401k match to your employees, which a lot of companies do, it might cost $20,000 to $30,000 per employee. Nobody brags about it. It's expected. It's table stakes. It's like doing something for your wife or your husband on Valentine's Day or their birthday. You better do something that keeps you at neutral. Yeah. So we're like, what can we do for our employees that they would never do for themselves? That would, like, there'd be invest $1 and I'd get $30 back. And we do it with, we said, let's offer house cleaning for every employee. Do you work for Giftology? You get house cleaning. And I spoke with Google. They're like, dude, that's crazy. Like, how much does that cost? I'm like, $3,000 per employee. And they're like, how do you afford that? And I'm like, really, Google? Like, you got slides in your lobby, like that you're worried about $3,000, but it's Seth Godin's concept of the purple cow. We're looking to find things that are go against the grain, that are radically different, that don't necessarily cost a whole lot, but they cost a whole lot compared to what most people do. Like, right? It's always context and comparison. It's like our business cards are $3. Most people have a 1 cent business card. Ours are $3. Our letterhead that we write handwritten notes are $10. Most people have a 10 cent. The juxtaposition of like, this is normally gone really cheap and we take it way higher, even though it's not really that high. But guess what? I have employees that their parents are doctors and their parents are talking at dinner parties about their kid that works at Giftology and has their own house cleaner. So there's a line of people, like all of my employees are recruiting their family and friends to come work for my company. I always challenge CEOs and GMs. If your employees aren't recruiting their family and friends to come work for your company, you don't have loyalty. You have a transactional relationship where you get a paycheck and they'll come and work. And that's it. You want somebody, everybody wants somebody to go the extra mile and recruit their family and friends, but they're not showing up for those relationships in an unusual, in a way that makes them feel special, like right. VIP. We all want people to feel VIP, but we give mediocre, vanilla rewards, perks, and benefits.
Yeah.
And so we get mediocre, vanilla outputs. Yeah. You know, like we love to talk about the Southwest Airlines and the Starbucks that maybe get like insane margins. Why do they get insane margins? Because their people feel loved. They feel taken care of. And so I don't care if you're selling widgets or technology or, you know, gaming, we're still like in the human to human connection. And so I always challenge people like, guys, like you can't expect your employees to deliver Ritz-Carlton service if they've never stayed at the Ritz-Carlton. So guess what? All of our employees get to go stay at the Ritz-Carlton, even when they're coming out of college. They think they're significant other or whatever. They're like, dude, that's crazy. And I'm like, really, compared to health insurance for 20 grand? You can send people to a lot of Ritz-Carlton stays for 20 grand. And guess what? That freaks them out in a good way to where they're like, oh, they actually walk their talk. They actually like are willing to invest in me in a different way than anybody else is. And so that's all we're talking about is looking for the areas where most people go cheap or don't do it at all and dial it up. Yeah. And the areas where everybody's having a pissing match, like dinners and golf and ball games, like everybody in business entertains the same freaking way. All of the competitors all do conferences. You know, like most people aren't hanging out at McDonald's with their best clients. They're going to Morton's or some high-end steakhouse. Guess what? So is everybody else. Why is your Morton's dinner any different than their Morton's dinner with $300 bottles of wine? It's not. It's a pissing match. Like, but if you can take that same dollar amount, that might be $300 or $3,000, and redirect it in an area where most people are giving out $30 toasters, and you give a $300 thoughtful gift to their home. Now, all of a sudden, the comparison is like they do $30 and I'm getting this $300 thing. It makes them feel special versus why is my concert ticket amongst 50,000 any different than your concert ticket amongst 50,000 people? And so that's the competitive advantage is thinking like an entrepreneur and saying, I got to go against the grain on what anybody else is willing to do.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you get uncommon results. Do uncommon, it's the very basic, do uncommon things, get uncommon results. Right. Do mediocre things, get mediocre results.
Yeah. And that's I mean, it's this also for anybody that's out there that's done our Excellence Wins program. It's the world is full of compromise, right? It's a wash in sameness. And that's what creates kind of the strategic battleground for our organization. So specific, let's talk about casinos for a minute. If you're a smaller casino competing against a larger property, you can't do the same things and win, right? They have more gravity. They have more amenities. They have more games. They have more of what you have. Therefore, you cannot do the same things and achieve different results. Their gravity will always overcome the position of the small property, where that small, so we say the larger properties typically compete on functional benefit. It's the things, it's the number of games, it's the number of amenities, it's the type of amenities. For smaller properties, what we're looking for is discernment, right? So can we behave and invest in such a way with our team members and with those players that creates, hey, for players that discern, they're going to see the emotional benefit of the property we work with and the property we're collaborating with to build programs that do not look the same. So when they're throwing out $20 items off the back of the boat because they're large and have to work on efficiency, we can say, hey, yeah, we're going to do some $20 items on property, and we'll do some $60 items on property, and we'll do some $100 items on property. And then the $300 stuff, like that's in home. And for casino folks out there, like give me a holler. I'll kind of walk you through the numbers. But it's effectively like where we're going in home and finding a lot of success is in deciles 1 and 2. You know, it's basically your top 25% of actual contributors that you can effectively lock them in and make it where them going exit bound is not a risk by building a relationship through this type of programming. And then where we're going now is, okay, let's look at deciles 3, 4, 5. And what does that in-home programming look like to multiply the relationship? And how does, you know, where we might already be getting all the trips from our top 2 deciles. There's trips that we're not getting in deciles 3, 4, and 5 that we can move with discernment. And meanwhile, we can let our competitors worry about trying to attract them with a billboard or an ad or a streaming commercial in their home. But it's, what does that streaming commercial look like? You know, more people toasting with the wine glasses. Here's your steak dinner. Jackpot at the slot machine. Yay, you dealt me 21. Casino logo, fade to black, right? Like all of our commercials look the same. We offer commoditized product, but it's our mindset that changes the game. To what you said, John, mediocre approach, mediocre outcome. Like anything that we treat as a commodity will be a commodity, whether it's a business card, our complimentary item program, hell, the player experience itself, right? Our team members and what we expect out of them or how we invest in them. Anything we treat as a commodity sort of existence will produce the results of a commodity. Anything we elevate can produce differentiated, superior results. And that's what we see time and time again. So let's get out there. Let's be disruptive. And John, I would like to exit with this and just tell me, man, like what role does love play in all of this?
Well, I think that if you look at any human being, like the book, The 5 Love Languages, is a Christian marriage book, but it sold 22 million copies and is even sold in Saudi Arabia. So it's hit a nerve, right? Like it keeps showing up in the New York Times list because I think that as a human, almost everything that we're seeking comes down to we want to feel loved and appreciated and respected. Whether you're making $50,000 a year or $50 million a year, most people are eating and drinking and sports and gambling and all the different things that we do. We're craving, like we're trying to fill this vessel as a human with the love, which sounds cheeseball, but you look at like the reason all the songs that are on the radio, most of them are dealing with heartbreak or love of some sort. You know, like you look at most movies, love is somewhere woven into the through line because as human beings, like I think that's something that we all crave. And so I think that when you can show somebody that you love and care about them and you see them as a human being, as a person, whether that's an employee, whether that's an investor, then you show people one-to-one you care about them and they're in their corner, not just because that they pay you money, but you actually care about them. The relationship flourishes and thrives, and people will do unusual, irrational things when they feel loved and appreciated. Yeah. And so the more as an organization you can align with that methodology of saying, hey, not only is it just a great way to be a great person and human, but oh, by the way, like it's really good for the bottom line to treat people this way, because when you connect to those relationships, they want to be loyal for the long term. Like you think about like your kids, you're loyal, truly loyal to your kids. You'll do anything to get them into the school that they want or to get them the job that they need or to like show up for them. And so why? Because of the relationship, because they feel, because you love them, you really care about them. And so the more you can weave that into all the elements of how you're showing up for relationships, it's not just, you know, like woo woo, feel good, like pat yourself in the back, but it's good because I think a lot of times the revenue and the resources flow from that reservoir of people feeling a certain way. And so love really does conquer all, and everything leads back to love.
Sure. And I mean, we all want to feel like seen, heard, and understood. When I'm in it for you, when you're in it for me, like we know that to be true. And this idea of giftology, it's the evidence. It gives everyone evidence that they are seen, heard, and understood, because a true gift is about the recipient and not the provider and the giver. And so, I would just let everybody know, if this is a story that you want to learn more about, I'm going to encourage you to dig in the Giftology, the book. Hell, let's set a call. You give me a ring. I'll get John on the line. We'll talk through what this actually means and what it looks like in practice. But effectively, it's taking personalized, American-made, high-quality, even artisan sorts of gifts, and giving those as a heartfelt message to the people we care about who contribute to our business and work communities in a meaningful way. But it's, John, we've been doing this now for, I think, 2 years, and we've learned a lot. The messages that we get from players are absolutely amazing and inspiring. I think about the widow, right, whose husband has passed and no longer gets gifts. And when this shows up for them, it's, the most meaningful thing and the best gift I've ever received. Like just messages like that make the host day, right? When that player brings the gift back to the property, is like, look at this, right? And it's like, we know we sent it, right? But they bring it back and they're just so happy about, having been part of this story. And I think from a marketing perspective, putting stories out there that are worth retelling is super important. And that's what Giftology helps us do. It helps us break away from sameness and compromise and doing what's expected in order to achieve dramatically different results. And that's why this sort of mindset and this sort of approach will always be part of any turnaround program that we're a part of. It's helpful.
Okay. I was going to say, before they buy the book, we try to put out content that gets people, allows people to do on their own. Like, we have a done for you agency, but just to get people thinking differently, their hosts differently, their marketing team, their sales team, their leadership team. You don't have to buy the book. You can go to The Giver's Edge with an S, thegiversedge.com. And we put out content like the 10 worst gifts to avoid giving. When you start to look at the list, it's like alcohol, food, gift cards. People are like, oh my gosh, that is our entire gifting thing. I'm like, great. Stop giving gifts. Start giving artifacts. Start giving heirlooms. I don't even like the word gift anymore, because it gets thrown into, cases of wine and Amazon gift cards and trinkets and transactional stuff. But, getting the articles that we write for Forbes and Inc. and whatever else, we send you all of that content so that you and your team don't even have to spend $1. I just want to get leaders thinking more generously, more thoughtfully, more creatively. And really, when I hear, a lot of times when somebody's smaller than the big guy, they're like, oh, we don't have as much resources. I'm like, if you think about the best restaurants in the world, they're not chain restaurants. They're not the big guys. They're boutiques. They're one location. And that they destroy, from a review perspective and a profitability per square foot perspective, the McDonald's of the world, or the Burger Kings, or the whatever. Yeah, they have more scale. But to me, you can be more thoughtful, more creative. One of our clients is the #1 restaurant in the world, 1111 Masson Park, out in New York, really #1. And the former owner, founder, leader, Will Guidara, latched on to what we're talking about, because that's how they competed against everybody else, was being more thoughtful and more creative. The reason they are on Jimmy Fallon the other night was because when Jimmy Fallon was going to come into the restaurant, he talked about man, what are you guys going to open up on the moon next? You guys are incredible. Guess what? They created a elevator experience to be like a rocket ship, and it made Jimmy feel like he was going to be going to eat on the moon. And of course, what does he do? He tells that story a bazillion times to his 15 million followers. And so when somebody's small, a small property, to me, is an advantage, because it actually forces you to think more thoughtfully and creatively. And you can actually destroy. You can become the David that destroys the Goliath, because you're constrained by those boundaries. And so a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is not spending more money. It's just being more thoughtfully, and, as your term, discerning to do that. And really, a lot of our newsletters and the content that we put out is around that mindset of how can you be small but destroy the big guys? I actually love going up against publicly traded companies, because they're all just afraid. They don't want to get fired. So they just want to keep things even. I get excited because the guys that are small, they don't have a big paycheck, but they have dollars to invest. but they need those one smooth stones to go in and freaking crush people. And they can, if they're willing to go against the grain. And that's really the whole mindset that we're talking about here.
You bet. So, best way. So we can go to the website, giversedge.com. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the Giver's Edge will get you signed up for some of our top articles and newsletter, type pieces that we put out for free. Then go to Giftology group if they want to learn a little bit about the agency, the done for you artifacts and heirlooms and the more in-home type programs or VIP type programs, or even employees. Like over half of our business stems from the internal customer, which is your employees. You can't, like I said, you can't expect your employees to deliver the surprise and delight Ritz-Carlton boutique service if you're like giving them the Motel 6 treatment.
Yeah,
it just doesn't work that way. Like you want elevated experience. Well, then you better go beyond the bare bones. Like, hey, we offer health insurance and we offer unlimited beer in our break room. Like that's not going to cut it if you want people to feel taken care of and their families taken care of and their spouses taken care of, all of those sorts of things. And it's not spending more money. It's just being more creative with what you're investing in your employees.
You bet. Stewardship of our resources, stewardship of other people's well-being, and hopefully just doing meaningful work and making sure that their experience with us is one of a net add. And I think Giftology helps us achieve that. Also, I just want to call out, John, that and to our listeners, like our relationship, we talk a couple times a month, and this is, for me, it's the value of being a lifelong learner and always looking for more coaches, right? So gifting, at least the way that you understand it is not how I understood it, right? Really moving from promo items and immediate ROI into sustainable vibrance and recognition, right? Recognizing people's contributions and then saying, here's how we're going to make you feel seen, heard, and understood. So I appreciate the gifts that you've given me, which are a lot of learning about what makes people feel and have an affinity towards our businesses, and your ability to kind of translate that information and that learning with me ultimately to create something here that we're taking to the open market and saying, hey, like if we're really after relationship and sustainable, vibrant communities, we need to think about how we're interacting a little bit differently and get this return on relationship. And but I appreciate your coaching relationship to me, our friendship, and our ability to stay connected as we continue to take this message out there to operators and business owners.
No, dude, I feel the same way. It's been fun to have iron sharpening iron, and it's fun to go against the grain and really be that little one smooth stone and a little I love playing David. I love going into industries and shaking them up and having an impact, because if you impact those leaders of those small organizations, it still ends up impacting millions of people based upon all the people that they serve. And so it's fun to have co-collaborators and guys and gals that want to lock arms with us, and us with them to go and shake things up and leave people better than we found them. So it's been an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just let everybody know, if you want to connect with me, purposeinfluencegroup.com, or on any of our socials, hit me up on LinkedIn. We can engage in a meaningful conversation about what Giftology might mean for your organization. And John, I appreciate you joining me today here on this special episode, bonus episode here, talking about relationships and gifting. And this episode was recorded using the magic of the internet here in Bixby, Oklahoma, and Edwardsville, Illinois, and is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. Our music is by Evan Grem. You can check out all his music on Apple Music, produced by Ben West. As always, thank you, Ben, for all your help. And until next time, we'll see you back here on Magic in the Room.